Until they bring the streetcars back. Chapter 9. I drove in the alley behind the building where the Dutch bakery was squeezed between the corner drugstore and the St. Clair's sweet shop. Gretchen was perched on the wooden cover of a garbage can rack, eating lunch from a paper bag, wearing that long white apron, that drippy white cap, and those ugly brown clodhoppers hanging from her skinny legs. I backed Finley's truck near the rear door of the bakery so it would look like I was making a delivery or something, and I walked over to her. Hi, I said, and I smiled. I hadn't really thought about it, but I don't think I'd ever smiled at her before. You better sit in the truck, she said without looking at me. I opened the back door and shoved several grocery boxes out of the way. By squatting with my back against the inside wall and facing her, we could visit with no one the wiser. But I wondered what kind of fiend we were hiding from, and almost chuckled over the dopey girl's imaginations. Working hard, I asked. No, I don't mind. How much do you make an hour? I don't know. Mr. Bueller gives it to my father. She swung one foot back and forth, and I got the feeling I was talking to a little kid. I'm getting 55 cents an hour, and I get some tips. She kept nibbling a peanut butter sandwich. Why won't your dad let you talk to me? He says boys are bad. They do bad things to girls. The Bible says it's bad. I can't go anywhere without him, except school in here. She seemed hypnotized by the motion of her heavy shoes swinging back and forth, and I caught myself watching it. You can't even talk to boys? No. Geez, that's terrible. What does he think will do to you? Right off, I wish I hadn't asked, and I was embarrassed, but she ignored my question. I have to wear ugly clothes. He says if I fix my hair or wear makeup, I'm helping the devil. I look so awful, I hate to go to school. You don't look so bad. Yes, I do. I look ugly. I am ugly. No, you're not. Really, it's just the dress and those shoes. That's not your fault. Criminy, I'd look ugly in those clothes. God, I kept putting my foot in my mouth, but she seemed to take it like a joke, me wearing her dress and stuff, and she glanced up with a little smile at the corner of her mouth. Where does your dad work? I said. Downtown at the post office. Sometimes he works on Saturdays, sometimes not. Does he really hurt you? I asked. She looked away. You promise never to tell? Yeah, sure, I promise. He uses a belt on me when I'm bare. She kept swinging her foot. It hurts bad. What about your mother? Doesn't she do anything? When Helga went away, my father started coming into my room at night to instruct me. I told my mother once that he was hurting me. She said she didn't want to hear about it, that my father was a godly man. Whatever he was doing was for my own good. She paused. It wasn't it wasn't good for Helga. What happened to Helga? She went away. Gretchen folded her brown bag like she planned to reuse it. What did he do to her? I can't tell you. He'll find out, I told. Did she really have a baby? I better go now. Would you like a donut? I can have one free. No, thanks. Does the baker know your dad? He goes to our church. We spend most all day Sunday at church. Do you go to church? She asked, glancing up at the moment. Yeah, we go every Sunday. We go to the Holy Gospel Church, she said. I hate it. She slid off the wooden cover. Do you go to dances? She asked while looking at the ground. Yeah, most of them. I hear I hear kids talking about them. Have you ever been to one? I asked. No. What are they like? Oh, they're not so hot. Some kids dance, and guys sit around and try to get up the nerve to go ask a girl to dance, and some sit there all night and never dance. She didn't say anything. I wondered why I made the dances sound so lousy, but I think it was because I didn't want her feeling really bad for missing out. Will you come back next Saturday? She asked. I'll try. Goodbye, Cal, she said, and she slunk into the bakery like she didn't belong in the human race. Yeah, I'll see you at school, I said to myself. I climbed in the cab, but before I pushed the starter, I just sat there. Geez, what was it her father did to her when he instructed her? I didn't want to know, and I really wanted to do something for her. Maybe I could buy her a decent pair of shoes she could wear at school. Or maybe I could listen to my dad, who always told me to leave well enough alone and stay out of trouble. I started the truck. Maybe her parents were doing the best they could with their crazy daughter, and they had to watch her closely. I pulled out onto St. Clair, off to earn my $4 or more in wages and tips, and then hurry home to get ready for the powwow. Rather than miss the fun, I'd gotten a date with Jean Dolly, and all afternoon I couldn't help but wonder if Gretchen had ever been to a powwow or a movie or ever let out of the backyard. Jerry picked me up and he swung up Summit to get Scott. Remember how scared we were when we'd knock on that guy's door? Jerry nodded across the parkway at the huge brick and stucco house. He'd come flying out after us like he was shot out of a cannon. Man, he could run, Jerry laughed. Yeah, I said. He must have waited behind the door in starting blocks. We'd run for our lives with him right on our tails. Through yards, over fences, Jerry said, down alleys, knocking over garbage cans, or getting clotheslined, I said, scared out of our wits. Then we'd meet over at Ramsey Playground and bust a gut laughing and telling each other everything that happened a million times. We pulled up in front of Scott's house and Jerry honked. Do you think he still chases kids? He said. I don't know if he hasn't died. Maybe the younger kids keep him in shape. Jerry flashed me that big toothy grin. Let's do it tonight. You mean right now? Yeah, only let's get Steve and the girls first and not tell them about the runner. But he might catch Steve, I said, knowing that Steve couldn't run really fast with his shriveled leg. Steve can move plenty fast if he's scared enough, Jerry said, as Scott opened the door and slid in the back. Hi, Jerry Cal. Remember, the runner, the guy who used to chase us when we'd knock on his door? Jerry said as he pulled away from the curb. After we rounded everybody up, Steve and the girls couldn't figure out why the three of us were in such a screwy mood, and Jerry and Scott, and I had all we could do to keep from giving away. Scott told them they were stopping to see his grandparents for a minute on the way, and no one said a word when Jerry parked on the far side of the boulevard from the house. Summit Avenue had a parkway about 100 feet wide that divided the lanes of traffic, and it was lined with huge elm trees. In jeans and jackets, the bunch of us romped over the boulevard and crossed the eastbound lane and scrambled up the steps of the banked yard like we'd been invited. Ever since the first time I banged on the door of that gloomy looking house, it gave me goosebumps just getting near it. How old is your grandfather? Jean said. He's over 80, Scott said. He can't walk very well. Jerry choked off a laugh by faking a cough as we moved onto the big open porch, and just knowing what was coming from behind that door had me working my way to the back of the bunch. Only a shadowy light slunk through the drapes in the wide front window. Knock, Scott told the girls. Loud, he's hard of hearing. Sandy was bouncing around as usual, and she knocked on the large wooden door without knowing she was committing suicide. Immediately, the game of chicken went into play, or who could stay on the porch the longest. Scott couldn't stand the suspense, and he stepped through the sheep and banged on the door like he meant to knock it off its hinges. The girls stood sweetly, expecting grandfather to appear, while Jerry and I, hanging onto each other with one hand, were coming right off the floor. All of a sudden, the door blasted open. Run, Jerry shouted. He leapt the steps and landed running. He's a madman. Run, I yelled from the edge of the porch. Scott went past me like he'd stepped on a hornet's nest, and the girls' feet were going up and down like they were tap dancing until they got it in gear and went flying off the porch like a Chinese fire drill, banging off each other down the steps and across the lawn. The runner came out the door and hesitated for a split second, like the shrieking girls confused him, and then, with a wicked smirk on his kisser, he blasted after me. Geez, I bombed down the bank and across the eastbound lane onto the parkway with him on my shirt tail. Boy, he could run. I ripped through a big tree and headed for the other side when I could ditch him in the yard. I heard him breathing hard and legging it behind me, and then, all of a sudden, I couldn't hear him anymore. I sprinted for another 10 yards and then dared to look back. The runner had veered off and was after Sandy, gaining on her as she ran across the parkway towards the intersection of Wheeler, squawking like a strangled chicken. Run, Sandy, run, I shouted. And I don't know why, but I felt close to her right then. She was really pumping, and as they passed under the streetlight, it looked like he'd catch her. Most of the other kids were hiding behind the elms on the parkway, and I could hear them laughing so hard they were coughing and gagging. When Sandy and the lunatic disappeared up Wheeler in the darkness, I held my breath and stared into the shadows, knowing that sometimes he'd double back and come flying out of nowhere. After a long, scary wait where I thought I saw the runner in every shadow, Jerry sneaked back to the car, started it, and turned on the lights. I blasted across the parkway, jumped in, and Jerry rolled the Oldsmobile along the street. Out of the dark, Scott jumped aboard half a block down. Holy balls, we did it, Jerry shouted. Did he catch Sandy? I said. I don't know, Jerry said. Did you see her run? Scott said. I almost fell down. I was laughing so hard. We cruised around the neighborhood calling out the car windows, scared that the guy would come zinging out from the dark and nail us. One by one, we found Steve and the other girls, and finally Sandy and Jerry headed out of Rice Street for Sucker Lake. Sandy wouldn't talk to Scott or any of us for the scaring the daylights out of her. How did you get away? I asked. Boy, she was really peeved, but then she couldn't stand not telling us what had happened, so she tried to sound really miffed. We ran into the big dog in the dark, Sandy said, and the dog started chasing him. Then she started cracking up, and everybody just about split a gut laughing, and Jerry almost drove over the curb. We congratulated Sandy on her run and roared when we thought of the poor guy a mile from home, still running for his life with a mad dog at the seat of his pants. Before we reached Sucker Lake, both Sandy and Steve were talking about doing it again.